hear Norman Finkelstein mop the floor with disgusting sex, Pestiny. And then there's Benny Morris. Don't think that he's just here to bore us. He's actually quite enraging, but compared to Pestiny, he's quite engaging. And cool, calm, Laura Bonnie holds it down with class. He quite smoothly and rhetorically kicks all their ass. And then there's Lex, he's a mess, doesn't know his head from a dress, and thinks he's being helpful even when he's just being a fool. Now this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time to go for colors to try to watch it really slow. Let's hear Norman Finkelstein mop the floor with disgusting sex, Pestiny and Pestiny. And then there's Benny Morris. Don't think that he's just here to bore us. He's actually quite enraging, but compared to Pestiny, he's quite engaging. Cool, calm, Laura Bonnie holds it down with class. He quite smoothly and rhetorically kicks all their asks. And then there's Lex, he's a mess, doesn't know a hit from a dress, and thinks he's being helpful even when he's just being a fool.
All right. We're back with the world's slowest debate recap. We're finally here. It's here. Finally, it is the final hour one recap. And we're happy to see it. We're happy to see it, folks. We like that. It's what we like. So we last left off with Lex Friedman butting into the end of Benny Morris's disgusting tirade, racist bullshit. And he goes, just to clarify, what you're saying is that the 47 war was an offensive war, not a defensive war. By the Arabs, yes, by the Arabs, yeah. And so you're saying that there was never a top-down policy of expulsion. Yes. Just to clarify the point. Now, this is out of place. We don't need this picture here. Because what happens after this is we get to hear from Moeen Rabbani. And that's where we're going to pick it up. Now, Moeen Rabbani is going to ask some questions. Very brief answers back from from Benny Morris. So now let's get Rabbani here. We're gonna read through. Should we read through it? Should we listen to it? Let's listen to it and read through it at the same time. How about that?
You're making the claim that
Yes, just to clarify the point.
if I understood you correctly, you're making the claim that transfer, expulsion, and so on was in fact a very localized phenomenon, resulting from individual land purchases, and that, if I understand you correctly, you're also making the claim that the idea that a Jewish state requires a removal or overwhelming reduction of the non-Jewish population was.
If the Arabs are attacking you, yes.
But that, let's say prior to 1947, it would be your claim that the idea that a significant reduction or wholesale removal of the Arab population was not part of Zionist thinking. Well, I think there's two problems with that. I think what you're saying about localized disputes is correct, but I also think that there is a whole literature that demonstrates that transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale than simply individual land purchases. In other words, it went way beyond, we need to remove these tenants so that we can farm this land. The idea was, we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain, and we have to get rid of them. And the second, I think, impediment to that view is that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an of the Zionist leaders as well. Is that long before the UN impediment to that view is that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an exclusivist Jewish state, and that transfer, forced displacement, was fundamental to that project. And just responding to, sorry, was it
Stephen.
Bonnell or
Bonnell,
Donnell?
yeah.
With a B.
Yeah.
Yeah. You made the point that sorry, was it
Stephen.
Bonnell or
Bonnell,
Donnell?
yeah.
With a B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does Destiny say there as he's like, and I'm sorry, he's trying to, he's addressing Jeffrey Epstein, and he's like, it was, and then Steven says something. What was that?
Bonnell or Donnell?
Bonnell, yeah.
Responding to that project. And just responding to, sorry, was it
Stephen.
Bonnell
He says, Steven.
or
Bonnell,
Donnell?
yeah.
With a B.
Yeah.
Or Bonnell, yeah. Okay, he's saying Stephen or Bonnell, yeah. And he says, with an E. And I should stop Morelli. Mr. Borelli, you are the world's biggest idiot.
Yeah. You made the point that
so he says, so he's just talking to Stephen. Because Stephen just says, yeah, Stephen or Bonnell, yeah.
the problem, you made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize is that the first and last result for the Arabs is always war. I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, which at the time was the longest recorded general strike in history. You may want to consult the book published last year by Laurie Allen, A History of False Hope, which discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. If we look at today, the Palestinians are once again going to the International Court of Justice. They're consistently trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his job. They have launched widespread boycott campaigns. So, of course, the Palestinians have engaged in military resistance. But I think the suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort and that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality.
I'll respond to that, and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious.
Hold your horses there, Stephen. He has to go quick. I wish he had more time. He probably feels exactly how Lex is trying to make him feel, which is rushed. He spoke very well. I would have loved to hear him go on and on more and talk more. I want to hear more about this book, A History of False Hope by Laurie Allen. Looks interesting. About a critique of the captive beginning to learn the cold impotence of international law. This book offers a provocative retelling of Palestinian political history through an examination of the international commissions that have investigated political violence and human rights violations. Interesting. This author is reader in anthropology. Reader? Political historian and anthropologist. Investigative commissions in Palestine. Rise and fall of human rights. Okay, these look like interesting books. essays and interviews. Okay, recall this book podcast she's been a guest or host on, maybe? I don't know. Interesting stuff. I don't want to read all this aloud. I don't want to get too far off track. But we're going to keep this in mind. Lori Allen, in her book, recommended. According to Rabbani, it discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. Because Stephen had made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize. The problem here that people don't recognize is. So he's saying the problem that people don't recognize, because that's not the stupid way that Destiny formed his argument. Moin Rabbani actually fucking listens. He pays attention. He's like, okay, this kid clearly said multiple times is that nobody understands that Arabs only, they don't know how to do any kind of diplomacy. They only engage in war. And he listened to that. And he says, you're making the, here. You made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize is that the first and last result for the Arabs is always war. I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, which at the time was the longest recorded general strike in history. Not very convenient, right? You're, Stephen, are you just picking and choosing? Are you cherry picking your facts? Okay, a general strike involving Arabs and mandatory Palestine encompassing labor, transportation, and commercial activities commenced on April 19th, 1936, extending till October the same year. April to October. It escalated into violence, marking the onset of the 1936 to 1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine. These strikes represent a component of the undocumented, detailed civilian resistance carried out by the Palestinian population, with the majority of them not directly participating in the warfare against the colonial government. The strike was eventually called off in November 1936 by the Haq, which is... What is the Haq? The AHC? Arab Higher Committee? Because here it says by the Haq, H-A-C. It's the same letters, but it's not the same order. And as far as I'm concerned, letters need to be in the same order in order to make the word to be spelled correctly. But I don't know, that's just me though. Maybe that's why I don't work for Wikipedia. King Ghazi of Iraq, King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia, and Emir Abdullah of Transjordan Transjordan appealed to the workers to end the strike because, as they wrote in Palestinian newspapers, we rely on the good intentions of our friend Great Britain, who has declared that she will do justice. Oh, that's so sad. That's just kind of a bummer. The United Kingdom will be our great friend, guys. We did it. We did it. All right, so he tells him about the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians. It was the longest recorded general strike in history. Then the book, History of False Hope, by this woman who discussed in great detail consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, with all these international committees. If we look at today, Palestinians are once again going to the International Court of Justice. They're constantly trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his job. They have launched widespread boycott campaigns. So, of course, Palestinians have engaged in military resistance, but I think the suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort, that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think has no basis in reality. So here's what he does. He turns to Benny and he says, Benny, you're claiming the transfer expulsion was in fact a very localized phenomenon resulting from individual land purchases. And you're making the claim that the idea of Jewish state requires a removal. And you're making the claim that the idea of a Jewish state requires a removal or overwhelming reduction of the non-Jewish population if the Arabs are attacking you, yes. But let's say prior to 1947, it would be your claim that the idea that a significant reduction or wholesale removal of the Arab population was not part of Zionist thinking. Okay, I think we're pretty well. We have visited and discussed these arguments at length so far. The Benny Morris says, yes, removal of the Arab population from the land was part of Zionist thinking after 1947, only because the Arabs were attacking them. Yeah. And Norm and Moeen Rabbani are arguing that no, it was part of Zionist thinking prior to 1947. And it really, didn't make a difference in their intentions, whether or not Arabs largely cooperated with them or laid down for them. All right. So here are the two problems with that argument. There's a whole literature that demonstrates that transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale than simply individual land purchases. In other words, it went way beyond it should be kind of in like the half quotes, we need to remove these tenants so we can farm this land. The idea was we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain, and we have to get rid of them. Transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale. The idea was we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain, and we have to get rid of them. There's a whole literature, right? So he's not pointing to any one book in specific, but some of the books, some of the authors that have been brought up are, one of them is Benny Morris himself. As have you, sir. You have said this too. No, I never said that. I said that and some other shit. Okay, the second problem with that is the view that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but establish an exclusivist Jewish state. Before the UN General Assembly, Palestinian and other Arab leaders had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an exclusivist Jewish state. And the transfer, forced displacement was fundamental to that project. Yeah, remember, transfer is the euphemism for forced displacement. When Benny Morris writes about forced displacement, he calls it transfer. Which, whatever, fair enough. It's a sociological, anthropological term or whatever. Fine. It just sounds a little clinical, a little sterile to me. Transfer. So, which is why Rabbani immediately clarifies that it is forced displacement. All right, so those are his 2 points against, not only against Benny, but I guess it's against the thing both of them are saying. But there's a lot of literature that says that the Zionist leaders had transfer on the mind. And 2, Palestinians knew that they had transfer on the mind. And this goes back to before 1947, before the General Assembly even convened. Okay? Then he turns to Stephen and he says, I'm sorry, what's your name, you little fuck? You little twerp? You said Arabs, the only thing we know is, they know is war, the first and last result. I think he means resort. First and last resort. I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 General Assembly. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, cool. Cool. Now Steven's like, I'm going to respond to that. Okay, buddy. Let's see what your response is, you fucking dork. Go ahead. Nothing to say? Oh, I got to push play. All right, hold on.
Curious, obviously. Respond to that and then a question.
And that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality.
I'll respond to that and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the 3 of you guys for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that...
A claim gets brought up a lot. I'm already so fucking mad at this guy. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the 3 of you guys for sure. fresher eyes. I know whose eyes don't feel fresh. Who's got two thumbs and not fresh eyes? Okay? Fresher eyes. I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I'm curious. That might be one of the most, like, annoying lies. Him saying that he's curious. I mean, if people who are curious, at the very least, would fucking listen. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that as soon as Jews envisioned a state in Palestine, they knew it would involve some mass transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. You know. Yeah, buddy. Did you not just listen to Moeen Rabbani? It's so weirdly passive-aggressive. Like, Moeen Rabbani not only did he make that claim, he made it as a rebuttal to your debate partner, who was responding to that point made by Norman Finkelstein. So when you say a claim that gets brought up a lot, instead of saying the thing you just said, okay, if Stephen Bozelli was actually listening, he'd have said, what, I don't know, what is this thing? He wouldn't have said any of this. Maybe he would have said the fresher eyes thing. Maybe if he was honest, he would have said, I don't know fuck about any of this shit, but I have a question. And then he'd listen. He'd sit his white ass down and listen. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point. Okay, we'll put a pin in that. The issue that I run into is, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace. Well, why do you feel that way, Stephen? Why do you feel? Tell me why. Well, because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it out of hand. Aww. A huge deal that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population. So that must have been a really good deal then, right? That must have been a super honest and like a deal that was in everyone's best interest, right? Because it was a huge deal that would have had a, quote, sizable Jewish and Arab population living together. Like there already were. The Arabs would reject it out of hand. So this is the reason, because the Arabs always rejected these partition agreements. That is why it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace. Why is it hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace? Well, because the Arabs weren't peaceful. So we can't know what would, if there would have been mass transfer. It's hard to know. It's hard to know if they would have been kicked out if they had just sort of laid down. Why do you say that? Why do you feel that? I feel like that because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it. Let's simplify this sentence. So he's saying it's hard to truly ever know. It's hard to truly ever know. So when he says I feel like, he's just saying IMO, in my opinion. It's hard to truly ever. How about we can't? We can't know if there would have been mass transfer, expulsion, in the face of Arab peace. In the face? Did he say in the face or in the case?
As soon as the Jews envisioned a state in Palestine, they knew that it would involve some mass transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point. The issue that I run into is, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like every...
In the face of Arab peace. In the face?
If there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like...
In the face of Arab peace. I'm taking that to mean if Arabs had not fought to protect their land or had any sort of pushback, if they had turned the other cheek, if they had been Christ-like. So he's saying, in my opinion, we can't know if there would have been mass expulsions in the case that the Arabs never fought back. Because Arabs always rejected UN partition agreements. This doesn't make logical sense. We can't know what would have happened because they always rejected the UN partition agreements. We can't know. I don't know. It's like we can't know what would have happened if Stephen Bonell didn't sexually harass people and rape people and share pornography that he made with like underage people. We can't know what would have happened if he never did that. You know why? Because he did that. Okay. It's just a moronic way of expressing. All he's trying to say is that while, yeah, there are some quotes and maybe some diaries that say what you said, we can never really know. You know why? Because the Arabs were so bad. We had these big, huge deals on the table. Would have had a sizable. Everybody should live together. Isn't that what you want? Don't you want them living together in peace? That's what they tried to offer them. But again, with the vagaries, sizable. Like when Rabbani talked about it, he was like, "This is the number. This is the percentage." But with Bonell, it's sizable. What the fuck is that? So what? You could expel half of the Palestinians. You'd still have a quote unquote sizable population. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about justice or morals. It doesn't teach us anything. It's not introducing some fact that we haven't heard yet. This was literally the opening. We heard the song. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. And here, this is the, third or second time that Stephen Bonell has opened his dumb mouth. And he's like, the issue I run into is that, I feel like the Arab side rejected the resolutions. Not only that, that's what he said in his first opening thing. Is this the only fucking talking point he has about 1948? Is that there was a war in 47? And he says this another time. He also frames it as if the other side is afraid to admit it or doesn't know it or doesn't want to talk about it. It was the opening goddamn statement. I never hear that it was largely instigated because the Arab rejectionism of the 47 partition plan. We never hear about that. He says it multiple times. They try to negotiate everything. They always give Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land because of their refusal to negotiate on anything else, whether it was the partition plan in 47, whether it was the Lausanne peace conferences afterwards, where Israel even offered to annex Gaza in 51. I mean, we looked into that shit. Gaza was annexed. What do you mean they offered to? What is that? How is that a fucking offer? It's like, hey, I'm gonna take your fucking house. I'll leave you you can go live in that little shed there. And then you're like, no, fuck you, don't do it. And we do it anyway. And then I'm like, hey man, sorry about taking your house and giving you this shed. But how about this? I'm gonna take half of your shed away from you. That's a nice offer. Isn't that a nice offer that I just made to you? All right. So he's an idiot. Okay, and then he's going to say, for instance. Okay, for instance. Okay, he says, at the beginning, he says, I am a green little dumbass who knows nothing about this, and you guys know a lot more than me. A claim that gets brought up is the inevitability of transfer in Zionism. A claim that gets brought up. Bro, there's a man sitting across from you who you said, I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm. Okay, so this is you responding to that. But you characterize it as a claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer. Or, and then he just restates what that means in more words. You're wasting time. You're wasting breath. He's padding it out. It's all just being This is all just fluff. Fluff, fluff, fluff. 92 words of fluff. 92 words of fluff. This is all nothing. He's like, here's what I'll do. I'll respond to that. And after that, I'm going to ask a question to the other guy. Because I'm so curious about it. What? Oh, okay. So, obviously, I have fresher eyes. You know why he's padding this out? Is he's just trying to, like... He's got, like, 2 or 3 things to say. And he's like, I just gotta say this in totally different ways, like, lots of different times. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this for you guys for sure, but... And because he's trying to frame this as, like, I'm just this guy who's coming in here, like, to read about this shit, and I don't really have any, like, bias or anything. I'm coming in at this with fresh eyes. He's implying that these old farts are, like, set in their ways, and they're blinded by their, their stubbornness. And he's like, my eyes on this are fresh, and I'm just gonna, I'm just so curious, like, what are you trying to say, man? Because I heard this argument, but now I'm thinking, what? He says a claim that gets and then he says, we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some period. Dude, if you want to talk about it, if it's relevant to this point, then fucking talk about it. A Zionist military plan executed during the 1948 Palestinian War for the conquest of territory in Mandatory Palestine in preparation for the establishment of the Jewish state. And so the plan was the blueprint for Israel's military operations starting in 1948 until the end of the war in 1949. So played a central role in the 1948 Palestinian expulsion of light known as the Nakba. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet. Okay, man. He's just trying to show off for the fucking professors. He sounds like that kid in class who's like, I'm the smartest one, and I'm going to prove it by raising my hand and asking the teacher, like, off-topic shit. That sounds a lot more advanced. Like, shit that sounds like he should be, like, up a level. Dude, this is the 101 level class. We're not talking about that stuff yet. That's what he said. That's how that struck me. Is I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D, but he says it so fast. If you're not gonna tell us about Plan Dalet, and then the like Plan D, Plan Dalet, they call it Plan D, whatever. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D. It's the fluff. It's padding out everything. He does like every little trick to pad out everything. Anytime he says a thing, he has to say or, and then re-say what that thing is in a longer and more insufferable way. If you have a pet, such as a dog or cat or bird or hamster or fish and like if someone is listening to you and they're like, yeah, I have a pet and I know what pets are, even if you didn't say their specific pet, like, they get it. We get it. it's not like someone's going, oh, what if I have a ferret? Yeah, pets. If you have a pet. Ferrets and parrots are pets if you have them, if you keep them. So, yeah, overuse of examples and ors, especially if you're not, I mean, I wouldn't really care about this shit if you were actually making points. But you're just padding out. You're padding out nonsense. You're padding it out. It's fluff. You're fluffing. We should call you Stephen Bonnell, the sex pest fluffer. For all this fluffing you're doing. Okay, he says, the issue that I run into is that it's hard to truly ever know if the Nakba would have happened if Arabs had stayed peaceful. Because the Arabs rejected the partition resolution. For instance, when we say that transfer is inevitable, when we say that Zionists would have never accepted sizable Arab population, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state? Okay, you just repeated yourself. And you made it sound like you're like doing, like, every time there was a huge deal on the table. Okay, so this, is this your example of a huge deal on the table? For instance, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan? How do you explain the acceptance of it? Meaning the Zionists accepted it. Or the Zionists signed it. But again, Stephen, if you were listening at all to your interlocutors, you would know how he explains that. Norm has explained that in his opening argument. It's fine if you disagree with it, but you can't say, how do you explain it? Because he fucking did explain it. He said that the Israelis had no intention of following the partition plan to the letter. They planned on breaking it. They planned on not following. They planned on not allowing a huge Arab population to live in the Jewish state. They planned to expel them out anyway. Because it was going to be their new state, and nobody would fucking care. In terms of like anyone in the UN, they weren't going to give a fuck. So, Stephen, you're embarrassing yourself. Because all you did is repeat. You repeated the fact that there's actual literal evidence of this. Quotes from leaders. Desires expressed in diaries. Dear diary, I can't wait till we get rid of all these damn Arabs taking our jobs, stealing our land. I mean, living on our land. I mean, it's not... Yeah. So he's like, oh, yeah, just because you have, like, evidence, I feel... Just because you have evidence, I have feelings. That's honestly what he says. Well, you can find quotes, you can find diaries. I feel that it's hard to truly ever know. Who cares if you could ever know what would have happened? Who cares if you feel that it's hard to ever have known, to ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of it? It's a ridiculous... It's just like, hey, we came to like take over your country and split it into pieces. And you know, if you hadn't been dicks about it, maybe we wouldn't have done that. It's nonsense. In the face of Arab peace. What a fucking stupid turn of phrase. I don't know what he means by that. In the face We were in the face of danger. No, we were in the face of peace. In the face of peace, what can they do? What will they do? They have to look like victims. What would they possibly do in the face of peace? Like they're so afraid of peace. And then he says, every time there's a huge deal on the table, the Arabs rejected out of hand. And then he wants to like say on the other side, how can we say that transfer was inevitable if the Jews accepted, if Israel, the Zionists accepted the 47 partition plan, that would have included Arabs. So that proves that they're not racist. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. And Norm explained that. Literally, that was his conclusion from his opening statement. Answered and then asked 40 minutes later by a fucking moron who's not listening. Is your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel these Arab citizens from their country? Or how do you explain that in Lausanne, a couple years later, that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people, those are citizens. Okay, we're going to have to listen to this. I think someone cuts in and answers that first question he said. All right, let's give this a listen.
Well, you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries. I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it out of hand. So, for instance, when we say that transfer was inevitable, when we say that Zionists would have never accepted, a sizable Arab population, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state? Is your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel all of these Arab citizens from their country? Or how do you explain that in Lausanne a couple years later that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people those citizens? But I'm just curious, how do we get this idea of Zionism always means mass transfer when there were times, at least early on in the history of Israel and a little bit before it, where Israel would have accepted a state that would have had a massive Arab population in it? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards? Or
Is that question to me or Norm?
or to either one? I'm just curious with the incorporation of the answer. Yeah.
There's some misunderstandings here, so let's try to clarify them. Number one, it was the old historians who would point to the fact, in Professor Morris's terminology, the old historians, what he called not real historians, he called them chroniclers, not real historians. It was the old Israeli historians who denied the centrality of transfer in Zionist thinking. It was then Professor Morris who, contrary to Israel's historian establishment, who said, now you remind me it's 4 pages, but it came at the end of the book. It was
No, it's at the beginning of the book.
transfer.
Yes,
Yeah,
transfer is dealt with in 4 pages
Yeah.
at the beginning
Okay.
of my first book on the Palestinian
okay.
refugee problem.
it's a fault of my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way.
Yeah, but I didn't say it
okay.
was central to the
Okay,
Zionist
allow me,
experiment or experience.
allow me.
You're saying centrality.
Okay.
I never said it was central. I said it
Okay.
was there,
Okay.
the idea.
It's, by the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also just a quick question, if I may.
Mhm.
Don't even get started. Lex, if I hear you, because I know what he's about to say. We've heard this part before. I know what he's about to say, and it's going to piss me off. And we're going to get to this. But I'm so infuriated that Benny interrupted him when he did. And continued to interrupt him to the point where Lex then had to interrupt. And then Lex had to give his little point. And then basically we had to hear just a bunch of back and forth after that. When I wanted to hear Norman cook. That's what I came for. I wanted him to cook. Because, like he said over here, and I don't have this on our Where was it? He says, I've read all your shit. I know your shit better than anyone else. I've read everything you've ever written. Not twice, but 3 times. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to see if we can hold you to a point, and then you argue me that point. I have no problem with that. That's what he's doing. He's like, Norm. Or Norm is like, Benny, you wrote this in your book. What do you have to say about it? That I can't think of a more fair line of questioning in a debate. If your opponent in a debate has personally written books that have evidence in favor of your side, you should absolutely bring that up. So Stephen asks this stupid question of like, how do you explain the inevitability of transfer in Zionism if Israel was willing to accept a number of Arab citizens in their country? Huh? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them or something? Like, what? Is that supposed to be, like, absurd? They, in fact, expelled them quickly. Why is it so... And slowly. They've been doing both. They did a whole bunch of them quickly and then a whole bunch of them slowly. What kind of question is that? Of course it was. Is that a question to me or Norm? Either one. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I asked a question. Who was that question for? Either one. I'm just curious for the incorporation of an answer. That's all it is. That's the reason I'm asking him. I'm just very curious for an answer. The incorporation of an answer. I'd like the incorporation, please, of the answer, please. Incorporate it. Let's see what we got.
I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Oh, answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Ooh, 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 ooh.
All right. Fucking ridiculous. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. It's like, in his brain, it's like, you gotta say something. You gotta say something that makes you sound smart. How about, I just want to know? No, that's way too casual. Say that you're curious. I'm curious for the answer. No, it's still too normy. It's not the answer, it's the incorporation of the answer. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? Just fucking say it! I'm curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yeah. Oh, fucking embarrassing. Embarrassing. Should be embarrassed. I hope you were embarrassed. And when you're embarrassed, that makes a bare ass out of you. You know? When you're embarrassed.
just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer.
Whatever.
It's okay to
Allow me-
You're saying central.
okay.
The central to the
Okay,
the Zionist
allow me.
experiment or experience.
Allow me.
You're saying.
Look at that over talking. Listen to that. Listen to that.
It's a fault of my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way.
Yeah, but I didn't say every.
okay.
The central to the Zionist,
Okay,
the Zionist
allow me.
experiment or experience.
Allow me.
You're saying centrality.
Okay.
I never said it was central. I said
Okay.
it was there.
Okay.
The idea.
it's by the way, it's
Oh, so frustrating. All that interruption was Benny trying to get him to shut the fuck up and getting an excuse to try to cut him off and say, I never said it was central. You said it was central. I just said it was the thing. Like, it was such a nothing little point that he was making. But it all started with this. He says it came at the end of the book. No, it's at the beginning of the book. Transfer is dealt with in 4 pages at the beginning of the first book. On the Palestine. Yeah, I didn't say every. It was central to the Zionist experiment. You're saying centrality. I never said it was central. I said it was there. The idea is there. Pre-1947. All I said was that it I'm not quoting part, I'm quoting 25 pages. Yeah, this is where Lex just fucking cuz it's got to actually be like a combination of malice and stupidity. Never attribute malice to what can be explained by malice plus stupidity. He says, by the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also, just a quick question, if I may. Okay, what's your question? Do you have a question? No. You have an admonishment. You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. It's also okay to say that those quotes do not reflect the full context of the... That would be fine. Now, I originally said that I thought this was Benny Morris who said it. It is Norm who says that. That would be fine. So if we go back to the quotes we've said in the past, and the three of you have written on this topic a lot, is that we should be careful and just admit, like... And then Stephen Bozell butts in. Well, yeah, real quick. Go fuck yourself, Stephen. I would have said, you know what I would have said? I've got a really sassy comeback from the 90s. Something we would have said in the 90s on a sitcom. I said, here's what I would have said. I'd have been like, hey, Steven, this is an A-B conversation. So see your way out of it. That's what I would have said. This is an A-B conversation. So see your way out of it. C, A-B-C, get it? It fucking sucks. Okay, I don't know, man. Let's just listen to what he does. Let's listen to what he does. And let's listen to what happens afterwards, because I don't actually remember.
It's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also, just a quick question, if I may. You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. it's also okay to say those quotes do not reflect the
That would
full
be
context
fine.
of the.
That-
So, like, if we go back, if to quotes we've said in the past, and you've both here have written, the three of you have written on this topic a lot. Is we should be careful and just admit, like, well, yeah, well, that's
Just
not
real quick, just to be clear, the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this,
Okay.
whereas Benny's saying it's a part of the.
I'm not quoting a part. I'm quoting 25 pages where Professor Morris was at great pains to document the claim that appeared in those early 4 pages of his book. Now, you say it never became part of the official Zionist platform.
It never became part of policy.
Fine.
Fine. It wasn't policy.
We're also asked, well, this is true. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? It's because it's a very simple fact, which everybody understands. Ideology doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are real world practical problems. You can't just take an ideology and superimpose it on a political reality and turn it into a fact. It was the British mandate. There was significant Arab resistance to Zionism. And that resistance was based on the fact, as you said, the fear of territorial displacement and dispossession. So you couldn't very well expect the Zionist movement to come out in neon lights and announce, hey, we're going to be expelling you the first chance we get. That's not realistic.
Okay,
now,
let me respond. Look, you've said it a number of times that the Arabs, from fairly early on in the conflict, from the 1890s or the early 1900s, said the Jews intend to expel us. This doesn't mean that it's true. It means that some Arabs said this, maybe believing it was true, maybe using it as a political instrument to gain support to mobilize Arabs against the Zionist experiment. But the fact is, transfer did not occur before 1947. And Arabs later said, and since then, have said that the Jews want to build a third temple on the Temple Mount, as if that's what really the mainstream of Zionism has always wanted and always strived for. But this is nonsense. It's something that Husseini used to use as a way to mobilize masses for the cause, using religion as the way to get them to join him. The fact that Arabs said that the Zionists wanted to dispossess us doesn't mean it's true. It just means that some Arabs thought that, maybe said it sincerely and maybe insincerely.
Professor Morris.
Later it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true.
Professor
because
Morris,
the Arabs attacked the Jews.
Professor Morris, I read through your stuff. Even yesterday, I was looking through Righteous Victim.
You should read other things. You're wasting your time.
No, actually, no. I do read other things, but I don't consider it a waste of time to read you. Not at all. You say that this wasn't inherent in Zionism. Now, would you all agree that David Ben-Gurion was a Zionist?
A major Zionist leader.
Right. Would you agree Chaim Weizmann was a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe they were. I believe they took their ideology seriously. It was the first generation. Just like with the Bolsheviks, the first generation was committed to an idea. By the 1930s, it was just pure realpolitik. The ideology went out the window. The first generation, I have no doubt about their convictions. Okay? They were Zionists. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
You keep repeating the same thing.
Because I have, as I said, Benny, Mr. Morris, I have a problem reconciling what you're saying. It either was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read, it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you've just invented.
Okay.
But
it was
inevitable. There.
It was inevitable. It was inbuilt, but it wasn't deeply entrenched. It was just there. It wasn't central. It, in fact, happened. But he's saying he's trying to say it was all the Arabs' fault, that Zionism has transfer inevitable and inbuilt, but somehow not deeply entrenched. I don't know, man. I don't know, Benny, how you're fucking squaring that. What's the difference? What, like, it seems like you have like an extreme and then like a slightly more extreme, and you're trying to split the difference in between those two extremes. I never said deep. Yeah, I said it was inbuilt. I never said it was deeply inbuilt. It's like, what the fuck? What do these words even mean when applied to Zionism and transfer? It's just, that's just something you just invented. Yeah, it's called paraphrasing somebody. It's literally what you do. You paraphrase what they said. He didn't invent it. He's quoting you as using these two words, inevitable and inbuilt. He's like, yeah, okay, fine. I said it was inevitable and inbuilt, but I didn't say it was deeply entrenched. Ooh, Benny. You're going to get those. Last time I ended my stream by saying fuck you to Benny Morris. And he didn't learn. He didn't learn from it.
And inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay.
Let me concede.
Fine.
Let me concede
Fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there.
Let me concede something. The idea of transfer was there. Interesting. So we need to color code this. So we're going to go take it back a little bit.
Read, it's deeply entrenched, deep in Zionism. In your realpolitik, the ideology they were. Agree, Chaim been
True, it just means that there's some Arabs thought that, maybe said it sincerely and maybe insincerely.
Professor Morris.
Later it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true.
Professor
because
Morris,
the Arabs attacked the Jews.
Professor Morris, I read through your stuff. Even yesterday, I was looking through Righteous Victim.
You should read other things. You're wasting your time.
No, actually, no. I do read other things, but I don't consider it a waste of time to read you. Not at all. You say that this wasn't inherent in Zionism. Now, would you all agree that David Ben-Gurion was a Zionist?
A major Zionist leader.
Right. Would you agree Chaim Weizmann was a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe they were. I believe they took their ideology seriously. It was the first generation. Just like with the Bolsheviks, the first generation was committed to an idea. By the 1930s, it was just pure realpolitik. The ideology went out the window. The first generation, I have no doubt about their convictions. Okay? They were Zionists. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
You keep repeating the same thing.
Because I have, as I said, Benny, Mr. Morris, I have a problem reconciling what you're saying. It either was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read, it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
inevitable and inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay.
Let me concede.
Fine.
Let me concede something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked about it.
Well, that's like, we keep bringing up this line from the 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now.
Bro, you do not fucking get the point, Lex. He's gonna later on, he's gonna tell Norm directly to stop trying to pull quotes from Benny's book because you can just ask him. Dude, it's called impeaching the witness. Benny wrote bullshit in his book that is different than the bullshit he's saying now. We have Benny right in front of us. We don't need to go to quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism? No, dude. You can't just say, oh, we can just believe whatever Benny says today and discount his actual historical work that he's being a hypocrite about. You fucking dickhead, Lex. You were such a fucking fool. This is so fucking infuriating. It's bad enough having Sex Pestiny and Benny Morris. To have a fucking moderator like this, what a absolute fucking fool.
We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion?
We could just ask him. We can just legitimately ask. He's talking to Norm like he's a fucking idiot. And he is being like an uber idiot. It's like an idiot squared. He's a quadruple idiot. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask him. What kind of fucking... Oh my God. I thought I was dumb until I met Lex fucking Friedman. What a cock. What a dickhead.
To Zionism, in its early version of Zionism, in whatever Zionism is today, and how much power, influence does Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideologies.
Get to the fucking point, dude. What a fucking babbling fool. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism and whatever Zionism today, and how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today. What are you doing, dude? What kind of fucking question is that? The philosophy, he's like, and how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have. So here he says the Zionism and ideology. And then he says the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism. So he's saying that Zionism is an influence and a philosophy and an ideology. Here he says how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel. And the influence, the philosophy, that it's just fucking word salad, dude. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask. What do you mean we can legitimately ask? Dude, this is what they've been arguing about for the whole hour. This has been the topic. I feel like there's three people trying to have a conversation who are basically now pretty much going in circles. I think this is when we're starting to circle around. And then there's two people who are not listening, but are trying to swing the whole debate for Israel. So they say, I mean, the more I think about it, every time I read it, every time I hear him say it, it sounds even stupider. Hold on, we keep bringing up this 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately. Does he think that just because we can talk to an author of a book that they're somehow what, unable to either misremember or anything of their own book, like just because they wrote it. But if they're sitting here, we don't have to pay attention to anything they wrote. We can just listen to whatever they say here. You know, and it's fine if an author wants to explain how, oh, I don't agree with what I wrote. But here we have someone who is challenging on him on what he wrote, and Benny's not backing down from what he wrote. He's not saying, "Oh, my work is illegitimate." He has to square that circle. He has to be the one to say, like, well, yeah, sure, I wrote this, but somehow my view is still this. We can legitimately ask him. That's what we've been doing this whole time, you fucking freak. We've been legitimately asking, and he's been explaining his point of view. Okay? He's saying that it was only this little idea that some people had, and the majority of them thought, or although he said a small minority believed it was immoral to do, so it never was part of any platform. It was never central to any policy until 1947, and it was only because of the aggression of Arabs that it became inbuilt into Zionism. Okay? Why, 56 minutes into your fucking debate, are you going to say, well, wait, hold on, everybody. We can just legitimately ask this guy to tell us the final answer of this question? Why? Why can't we just say, look, we don't need to go to the courts. We can just let Norman Finkelstein decide the truth of the matter. Like, if a historian writes history in a book, and that history is peer-reviewed and found to be legitimate and is accepted by the, you know, consensus of historians, and then the author themselves, decades later, is saying things that seem to contradict it or seem to not take it into account, you don't just say, well, whatever the guy says now is right. We don't have to go to the book. We can just ask him. Well, maybe he fucking doesn't know. Or maybe he, like, is motivated to lie. Or maybe he's motivated to skip over some of those parts that he doesn't want to talk about. You're a debate moderator, dude. You can't just say, like, oh, well, this side's right. Oh, okay, well, how about this? This guy on this side of the debate, he can just tell us all what the answer is, okay? And I'm forbidding you from referencing his book anymore, because you have to just ask him. And then he'll tell you. And you have to just take his answer, okay? So fucking frustrating. Fuck you, Lex Luthor. Let's keep going.
Zionism have on Israel today?
The Zionist movement up to 1948, Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise.
The Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. The Zionist movement up to 1948. Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise. It's a movement, it's an ideology, it's an experience, it's an enterprise. It was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the hold of Zionism, if you like Bolshevism, held the Soviet Union, gradually faded. And a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual successes and then capitalism and all sorts of things which had nothing to do with Zionism. A lot of Israelis think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which had nothing to do with Zionism. A lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism. And then the capitalism. What do you mean?
Ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. And I think Zionist ideology was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the hold of Zionism, like if you like Bolshevism, held the Soviet Union, gradually faded, and a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which have nothing to do with Zionism. But Zionism was very important. But what I'm saying is that the idea of transfer wasn't the core of Zionism. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jews who had been vastly persecuted in Eastern Europe and, incidentally, in the Arab world, the Muslim world, for centuries, and eventually ending up with the Holocaust. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jewish people by establishing a state or re-establishing a Jewish state on the ancient Jewish homeland, which is something the Arabs today even deny, that there were Jews in Palestine or the land of Israel 2,000.
Okay, I don't know. We're going to get to this. The Arabs today even deny that there were Jews in Palestine. Okay, we're gonna get to that. A future point. Keep a pin in that.
1,000 years ago, Arafat famously said, what temple was there on Temple Mount? Maybe it was in Nablus, which of course is nonsense. But they had a strong connection for thousands of years to the land to which they wanted to return, and returned there. They found that on the land lived hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and the question was how to accommodate the vision of a Jewish state in Palestine alongside the existence of these Arab masses living on, who were indigenous, in fact, to the land by that stage. And the idea of partition, because they couldn't live together, because the Arabs didn't want to live together with the Jews. And I think the Jews also didn't want to live together in one state with Arabs in general. The idea of partition was the thing which the Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 1937 most of Palestine. In 1947, the ratios were changed. But we can live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. And this was the essence of it. The idea of
living side by side with each other does not mean that you have a fucking border in between. Side by side means you live all in the same place, generally. You can work side by side with someone, meaning multiple people at the same company working together. Live side by side. That's not what that is. Putting a giant fucking wall and a border crossing with armed guards is not living side by side. I think that's just one of these major, like, conceptual fucking things. You look at a map and you, like, think, like, oh, there's the country, there's the line, and then there's the other people, and you make them two different colors, and you're like, oh, okay, all the these people just stay in that part, and they're side by side, as if they can all just, like, peek their heads up and look over and see a guy on the other side of the border and be like, hey, what's up? Howdy, neighbor. Hi, neighbor. You never... They look like neighbors on a map, but no... If you live in a border town, even if you're in a town on the border, you're not going to look any direction and see across the border at a person going about their life. right? Just the border crossing itself is going to be several miles of like in between. There's always like the border checkpoint for the one country, and then a whole like big buffer zone where you actually officially cross the line, and then there's a whole border check buffer zone for the next country you're in, right? And in the sense that you would be neighbors, is that there would be movement and transfer of people. Transfer. Yeah, I mean, people going in and out and crossing the border and living side by side. That's the closest you could get to living side by side with people on the other side of a border. If that border had two equal peoples on either side, like, oh yeah, you guys and us guys, whatever, like crossing over back and forth, hanging out, having dinner together. That's going to be a very, very few. Everyone else in that country, in either of those countries, are never going to see the people, quote unquote, living side by side with each other. It's only side by side in the stupid way that if you like look at a map and think that that's real. Maps are not real. I love maps. Maps are cool, but they're not accurate. Like political maps. If you're looking at political maps and thinking like, oh, like that you could like somehow solve a dispute or a border dispute just by kind of looking at where you think the line should be, you're fucked. And the way he's imagining it, like, oh, in 1947, we had this great plan that they would have been fine. They would have been side by side with each other. Like no, they wouldn't have been side by. Look at this fucking shit. Let's look at the partition plan 1947. I mean, look at that shit. Just fully like carving this. Okay, all the greenish blue, which should be the water based on the color. They're just like, yeah, we're gonna take that away from the Palestinians, just slicing it right there. We're gonna take this whole bottom part, take all this part, boom, slice this part here. I mean, it's so much worse. The actual map of Israel Palestine is so much worse than this. So you can see how like liberal Zionists would be like, look at this. This was the plan that they abandoned. They didn't even accept it. And look, they would have lived side by side by side with each other. They would have lived side by side. When it's like, okay, you used to have this whole nation to yourself to travel freely and you're equal citizen. Now we're just gonna slice just most of it up for us. And if you ever want to go to Jerusalem and you happen to live in Gaza, well, fuck you. You want to go to Tel Aviv? You want to go to Haifa? We're gonna change it to, I think, I don't know. It's just so fucked. This is not living side by side. This is like inflicting massive violence. That's what borders are. Borders are violence. Borders are not lines in the world that partition people off of, they're not just these little lines that people can stay in and out of, right? They're so arbitrarily, they're done on maps. They're not done in the real world. Okay, occasionally there's like, okay, a river, a mountain range. There's like natural borders here and there, coastlines. But these ones here don't fucking exist. They're just random lines that were decided arbitrarily, pretty much. And the only way for them to become real is to build a fucking structure yourself and enforce it with violence, with a monopoly of violence, with more firepower than anyone can resist. And then you have a border, and then we can look at a map and say, yeah, look at that. There's a border there. But To characterize this as living side by side is fucking ridiculous. You're not living side by side with anybody if you put a fucking border in between them and you enforce it with violence. I mean, you can draw borders on the map all day long, and if nobody knows or cares about it, then it's whatever. But it's the idea that you're enforcing it, that you're actually putting up real ass walls and shit. That's when it's violence. Borders. She's one of those social constructs that is incredibly, on a very small scale, it makes sense to have zones and spaces and borders and things that's like keep people in or out of certain places. But to have them on this kind of scale, it's just abhorrent. It's abhorrent. Proposed by the Ad Hoc Committee on the Palestinian Question. Boundary proposed by the United Nations Special Council on Palestine. That's this green line here. They proposed a different, slightly different wiggly line, and then, I guess the plan of partition sort of didn't quite go along with that, or did. I don't know. What a weird little green line thing. The Arabs rejected it outright. Of course. Why? Of course you would reject this. No. You can't break our country up. You can't break our country up. No. No, you can't do that. Anyone would say that. Anyone would say no to this fucking deal. Unless they had absolutely no idea what they were actually agreeing to. Living side by side with each other. What a dick.
It was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But in 1947-48, the Arabs attacked, trying to destroy essentially the Zionist enterprise and the emergent Jewish state. And the reaction was a transfer in some way, not as policy, but this is what happened on the battlefield. And this is also what Ben Gurion at some point began to want as well.
Right.
Well, one of the first books on this issue I read when I was still in high school, because my late father had it, was the Diaries of Theodor Herzl. And I think, Theodor Herzl, of course, was the founder of the contemporary Zionist movement. And I think if you read that, it's very clear. For Herzl, the model upon which the Zionist movement would proceed, his model was Cecil Rhodes. I think, Rhodes, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, has quite a prominent place in Herzl's diaries. I think Herzl was also corresponding with him and seeking his support. Cecil Rhodes, of course, was the British colonialist after whom the former white minority regime in Rhodesia
Okay, you read the Diaries of Theodor Herzl. His model was Cecil Rhodes. It's very clear for Herzl, the model upon which the Zionist movement would proceed. It's very clear for Herzl, the model upon which Zionist movement would proceed. His model was Cecil Rhodes. I think Rhodes, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, has quite a prominent place in Herzl's diaries. Herzl was also corresponding with him and seeking his support. Cecil Rhodes was the British colonialist after whom the former white minority regime in Rhodesia was named. Oh, interesting. And Herzl also says explicitly in his diaries that it is essential to remove the existing population from Palestine. Okay, so Theodor Herzl the founder of the contemporary Zionist movement, who built his model upon the work or the ideas of Cecil Rhodes. This guy died in 1904. He formed the Zionist organization and promoted Jewish immigration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state. But he died in 1904 at age 44. In 1897, he convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, and was elected president of the Zionist organization. Diplomatic initiatives, appealing unsuccessfully to German Emperor Wilhelm II and Ottoman Sultan Abdulhamid II. At the 6th Zionist Congress of 1903, he presented the Uganda Scheme, endorsed by the Colonel Secretary Joseph Chamberlain on behalf of the British government. The proposal, which sought to create a temporary refuge for Jews in British East Africa following the Kishinev pogrom, was met with strong opposition and ultimately rejected. Herzl died of heart ailment in 1904. I was buried in Vienna. Okay. So he is one of the early thought leaders of Zionism. Goes way back. Just curious if any. I don't know. All right. And then Cecil Rhodes, British colonist. Oh, he died in 1902 at 48. English South African mining magnate in southern Africa. He and his British South Africa company founded the Southern African territory of Rhodesia, now named Zimbabwe and Zambia. Wow, that's so fucking crazy. It's just like, oh, it's a country now. He also devoted much effort to realizing his vision of a Cape to Cairo railway through British territory. Rhodes set up the Rhodes Scholarship. I've heard of that. That's from this guy? Not to be confused with Rhodes Scholar. Rhodes Scholar is an American non-for-profit organization that provides educational travel programs. No, that's not what I was thinking. It's the Rhodes Scholarship. A national postgraduate award for students to study at University of Oxford in Oxford, United Kingdom. The scholarship is open to people from all backgrounds around the world. So it's specifically for Oxford. I was just like, he's a Rhodes Scholar. What does that mean? It means you got to fucking scholarship from a fucking genocidal freak. Holy shit. I didn't know that. A sickly child, he was sent to South Africa by his family when he was 17 years old in hope that the climate might improve his health. He entered the diamond trade at Kimberley in 1871. When he was 18, with the funding from Rothschild and Company, began to systematically buy out and consolidate diamond mines. Over the next 2 decades, he gained a near-complete monopoly on the world diamond market. His diamond company, De Beers, formed in 1888, retains the prominence into the 21st century. Son of a vicar. A representative, deputy, or substitute, anyone acting in the person of or an agent of a superior. So he was obviously rich. What? I don't understand. His family's like, go to South Africa. Maybe the climate will be better. And, well, what should I do in the meantime? I don't know. Here, take some pocket millions and just buy and consolidate a bunch of companies and build a monopoly. Holy shit. This guy, I'm not even partially through his fucking Wikipedia page. Has there been a Behind the Bastards on this guy? I feel like there should be. With the strengthening of international movements against racism, such as Rhodes Must Fall, Rhodes' legacy is a matter of debate to this day. Critics cite his confiscation of land from the black indigenous population at Cape Colony and false claims that southern African archaeological sites such as the Great Zimbabwe were built by European civilizations. Yeah, I might... Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. What a dick. All right. Well, we're going to end it here. I think we've officially passed hour one. This was the hour one final recap, part one. Because we are...
was named. And Herzl also says explicitly in his diaries that it is essential to...
That's 1 hour. Actually, I think it's probably 4 more minutes because they actually start talking at 5:29. Anyway, I don't know. Whatever. We'll do the official final hour one recap in our next episode, which will be Finkelstein v. Pestiny. Final hour one final recap part 2. That's when we'll do it. All right, let's go to bed.